especially, when we're just starting out.
Yeah, those common money missteps people tend to make in their 20s.
Exactly. And the source we're looking at, it's an article titled 5 Money Mistakes People Make in Their 20s. Gives us a pretty clear framework, I think.
It does. It helps understand some of those, well, foundational financial hurdles, maybe challenges and opportunities too, frankly.
Right. So our mission here with this deep dive, let's try and pull out the most important insights from this piece.
Kind of the key takeaways.
Yeah, think of it like getting the distilled wisdom, without needing to read the whole thing yourself, understanding some key financial challenges you might face, and crucially, how you might be able to, sidestep them.
And the article sets the scene pretty honestly. It says, look, your 20s can be fun, absolutely, but let's be real, it's not always easy financially speaking. It points to pressures like, student debt, which is a big one for many, plus really high rents in a lot of places, and sometimes just, finding your feet in a tough job market.
Yeah, that perfect storm, isn't it? Often lower entry-level pay hitting those suddenly very real adult expenses.
Exactly. And the source is clear, there aren't really any magic bullets. But sensible budgeting, smart ways to handle saving and debt, and even starting to think about stuff like pensions, they can build a much stronger foundation.
It's about setting yourself up, really, for later on.
Precisely. And the article dives straight into the first big one, a mistake that sounds maybe deceptively simple, but has these huge long-term effects.
Okay, which is?
Not signing up to your workplace pension. Now, the source points out, for most people starting their first, proper job, you're actually automatically enrolled these days.
It's just the default now, yeah.
Thankfully.
It is. But even if your earnings are, say, below the threshold for auto-enrollment, your employer still has to let you know you have the right to join.
And the article uses a great phrase for choosing not to join it. Calls opting out a false economy.
A false economy? Why is that? Just because you see a little bit more in your paycheck right now?
Exactly. You only get your own contribution back in your take-home pay, and that's minus tax. But you completely miss out on what your employer puts in.
Ah, the employer contribution.
Yeah, the typical setup the source mentions is you put in 5%, your employer adds another 3%.
Wow, okay. That's literally free money you'd be leaving behind.
It is. The article nails it by calling that employer bit deferred pay. Think about it. It's like a raise they're offering you, just for later. You wouldn't turn down a pay rise now, would you?
Probably not, no.
And the real kicker, especially in your 20s, is time. Starting young means those contributions, yours and theirs, have decades, literally decades, to potentially grow. Compounding works its magic.
Right, that snowball effect.
Exactly. Opting out for, a few extra quid now? It just seems really short-sighted when you see that long-term potential gain.
Okay, message received. Don't leave free money on the table. Got it. Moving on then, the next pitfall the source flags is getting into the wrong sort of debt.
And this one feels almost unavoidable for a lot of people in their 20s, doesn't it? Lower starting salaries bumping up against big costs, like needing a deposit just to rent a place.
Furniture, maybe a car to get to work, yeah.
And the source points out how easy it is now to slide into debt. You've got buy now, pay later everywhere, quick online credit cards, personal loans. They're incredibly accessible.
And there's a psychological thing, too, which the article mentions, and I found this interesting. If you've already got this big student loan number hanging over you, well, taking on another few hundred, maybe $1,000 on a credit card, it can feel almost insignificant. Like, what's the big deal when you already owe so much?
Right. And the article really warns against that kind of thinking. Because those short-term consumer loans, credit cards, they are fundamentally different beasts compared to student debt. Critically, much higher interest rates. Way higher, usually, and far stricter repayment schedules. Student loans often have income contingent repayments. These don't.
And if you slip up on one of those stricter repayments?
Well, the article points out that charges and penalties can rack up incredibly fast. You fall behind, they add fees, maybe your interest rate jumps, and suddenly that small debt is spiraling into something much bigger.
A trap.
Pretty much. The core advice is simple, but maybe not easy. Set a realistic monthly budget and really try to live within it. Avoid getting caught in that spiral.
Living within your means, which, especially when those means feel, limited, connects straight to the third mistake the article highlights: spending, not saving.
Yeah, and it's easy to hear that and think, duh, obvious. But the source does acknowledge how genuinely difficult it can be to actually find that extra cash to save in your 20s.
Absolutely. Rent, bills, trying to have some kind of life.
But the insight here is that even small, regular savings really do make a difference. And it recommends a key habit shift. Save as soon as you get paid. Don't wait until the end of the month to see what's left over, because often there's nothing left.
The classic pay yourself first idea.
That's the one. Getting into that discipline, that habit, it's crucial, not just for the habit itself, but because it builds that vital nest egg, an emergency fund.
Right, so if the car breaks down or your laptop gives up the ghost.
Exactly. Having even a few $100 tucked away means you might not have to reach for one of those expensive short-term debts we were just talking about. It avoids one problem by solving another, in a way.
Smart. And does the source suggest where to put these savings? Any starting points?
It does. It suggests looking at things like tax-efficient ISAs or maybe high-interest savings accounts. It makes a distinction, though.
Oh, yeah.
Using cash ISAs for shorter-term goals, stuff you might need in the next year or two, like that emergency fund, or maybe saving for a specific purchase, a holiday, whatever.
Yeah.
But for medium to longer-term goals, like, say, saving for a house deposit, or even further out, it points towards things like investment ISAs or lifetime ISAs. The idea being the money has more potential to grow over a longer time frame there.
Okay, right. Now this next one, mistake number 4. This is where it gets really interesting, I think. It's not building a robust credit history, which sounds completely counterintuitive after we just talked about avoiding bad debt.
It does, doesn't it? But the source makes this really vital clarification. It's not about racking up bad debt or getting in over your head. It's about using credit wisely, responsibly.
Okay.
That's what builds a strong credit score, showing you can handle borrowing.
So how do you use credit wisely, then, in practice? What does the article suggest?
The key things are making your regular payments on time, every single time,
Yeah.
and staying well within your credit limits, like not maxing out your credit cards.
Right.
Because the article points out later on, when you need to borrow for something big, a mortgage is the classic example, but even just getting a decent rate on car finance lenders get nervous if you have no credit history at all.
Because they just don't know if you're reliable.
Exactly. They have no track record to judge you by. So, ironically, showing you can borrow small amounts now and, crucially, pay them back responsibly. That's your ticket to getting access to larger amounts more affordably later on.
Makes sense. It proves you're a lower risk.
Precisely. And the flip side is pretty harsh. Missing payments, even on stuff like your phone contract or utility bills, not just credit cards or loans, leaves black marks on your record.
And those marks mean?
They can mean being turned down flat for credit later, or, if you do get approved, facing much, much higher interest rates, which costs you a fortune over time.
Ouch. Okay. And the golden rule for things like credit cards, which helps build history without costing you.
Pay off the balance in full, every single month. That way, you get the benefit you're using credit, building that history, but you don't pay a penny in interest. You're demonstrating you can handle it without falling into that debt trap.
Crucial distinction. Okay, final one. Mistake number 5. Not taking enough risk. And again, this might make you pause. Didn't we just say be sensible, avoid the wrong debt?
Yeah, it sounds a bit contradictory again, but the article is very clear. This isn't about, betting your rent money on a horse.
Right, not physical adventure risk.
No. It refers specifically to having a slightly more, let's say, adventurous outlook with your longer-term savings. We're talking about the money in those pensions and investment ISAs we mentioned earlier.
The money you won't need for ages. Why is risk okay, or even good, for that money?
Because the time scale is so long. Years, probably decades. That long time frame means you can actually afford to consider investments that might be classified as higher risk.
Things that might bounce around a bit more in value.
Exactly. The source acknowledges they can be more volatile in the short term. Their value can go up and down quite a bit, which can feel a bit scary if you watch it day to day. But historically, these types of investments have shown the potential for much higher returns over those longer periods.
And the source gives some context for that potential, like compared to just leaving it in cash.
Yes, it specifically mentions that, historically speaking, equities, which basically means shares in companies, have tended to outperform cash savings over periods of 10 years or more.
So holding cash long-term feels safe, but
it often doesn't keep up with inflation. So the actual purchasing power, the real value of your money, can slowly erode over time.
What sort of higher risk areas does the article mention as examples?
It gives examples like funds that invest in emerging markets, or maybe in smaller startup companies.
Yeah.
These have higher growth potential, but also higher potential for loss in the short term.
Okay, but there's a caveat, right? You don't just pile into one thing.
Absolutely not. Crucially, the source heavily emphasizes the importance of diversification.
Spreading your money around. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly that. Spreading your investments across different types of companies, different industries, different parts of the world, it helps smooth out some of that short-term up and down movement. If one area takes a dip, hopefully another one is doing okay. It's about managing the risk intelligently for that long-term growth potential, not avoiding risk altogether when time is on your side.
Okay. So pulling this all together, what does it mean? This deep dive, it really gives us a sort of map of the financial landscape in your 20s, highlighting some major potholes to watch out for.
Yeah, a really useful checklist almost.
We've covered the non-negotiable value of workplace pensions, don't leave that free money, the dangers of bad debt versus the surprising necessity of building good credit history.
That balance.
That balance, yeah. And the foundational habit of saving before you spend, even small amounts. And finally, this strategic approach to taking appropriate investment risk, but specifically for your long-term goals.
It's a really comprehensive look at how those choices you make early on, they really do compound, for better or worse, over time.
Absolutely. Which, thinking about it, raises a pretty important question for you, the listener. Considering the source encourages what feels like a bit of a financial tightrope walk, telling you to avoid the wrong kinds of debt, while at the same time saying you need to use credit wisely to build a history.
Right, and balancing that urge to spend now with the definite need to save.
While also maybe taking some calculated investment risk with money you won't touch for years. How do you personally navigate these actions that might seem contradictory at first glance to actually build that stable financial base for yourself? Something to think about.